Hello again, and welcome to our fourth webinar. Today's guest is Kathleen Bühler. She is a curator at Kunstmuseum Bern, and she is responsible for the current exhibition Chinese Whispers. As the last time, the previous meetings with Mr Uli Sigg and Michael Schindhelm are available on Diversity. We've now reached chapter 6. This is our final chapter from the running course. The chapter is focusing on the M Plus Museum and the events surrounding the 15th anniversary of CCAA. My name is Barbara Ruth. I'm an art historian and in the team of the ZHdK CCAA. First of all, welcome, Kathleen. Nice to have you. And congratulations to your exhibition at Kunstmuseum Bern and Zentrum Paul Klee in Bern. What I heard, the visitors' expectations exceeded by far. How do you explain the success of this exhibition?
We are really overwhelmed and very, very happy because first we expected that probably on both venues we will have, if it's going well, 40,000 visitors.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have, the show is going to last another month, and we already have 30,000 on each venue. So it's amazing. And I think one of the main reasons why so many people are interested in not only art, public art visitors, but from everywhere is the reason that I think people realize China is a big issue, is a big topic, that we need to understand, confront each other with China, to try to get an attitude to what could be happening in the future, that we're getting closer together. And I think that is one of the main reasons. And also there are some recent developments like that Swiss companies are bought by Chinese companies. I think it's coming from everywhere that China is getting huge in Switzerland as well. And by going to visit an art show, it's like getting a first contact, trying to understand what is happening in China. And I think that is one of the explanations I have for this phenomenon.
Like getting a new approach, not just an economical one, as you said, like Chinese companies buying Swiss companies. So getting more a cultural approach to this country or to this kind of unknown territory, would you say?
That was also one of what I tried very hard as a curator. I didn't want to raise any more fears about China, about this giant, economic giant, but I wanted that we here, because this show was done for a Western public, that we try to understand ourselves in the relation to China already, the kind of stereotypes we have in mind, the kind of anxious
emotions.
We do have, and that by looking at how Chinese artists mirror their experiences, we can actually, as humans, connect and get another way of thinking about China. So that it's a huge invitation to visitors to come and just watch and see and let themselves be surprised. Also absolutely, and learn about reality, the everyday, the recent history of China, and also the critics, but artists sometimes are also, of course, proud of what they achieved in China. So all these ambivalent emotions, and I think that people value that very much. They appreciate that this is not just stereotype or too critical show, but it's a show that offers a wide panorama of different experiences.
Speaking about the show, you've divided it into 4 chapters, I would say. Can you tell us more about the structure? How did you come up with those chapters? What was the process finding those chapters, or the questions you had for yourself? working with this collection?
First, there was this fact that we had 11 years ago. We had the first show with the collection from Uli Sigg, and I just wanted to focus on artworks that he acquired after 2005. So
after the last
show,
the last show,
yeah. And also I wanted to look at art from a younger generation. So people who have already more access to the internet, who can travel, who can have their residencies abroad or even study abroad, because I wondered how different is this kind of art to what is to the art here in the West, because if both sides have the same kind of access to information and can travel around, how can you tell if it's something was done in China or somewhere else?
Wouldn't it be similar or
what is globalization already to the art world? So I wanted to I started with that in mind, and then of course on the other hand I thought, well, yes, this show is for a Western public who probably has never been to China yet. So I wanted to give them an entrance into that reality. So I focused on two main parts. One is more art that documents the everyday, the reality, the recent history, finds icons for what was happening in the last 30 years. And the second part is more about formal questions. So what is Chinese art in the globalized world? How can you tell what is Chinese and what's not? If it's really international art and not looking different from Western art, how actually is there also an art that reflects more on tradition and who kind of tries to go back to its source? So it's these two different topics, but then always two chapters who complement each other. So we have in the formal section, it's one chapter which really shows or tries to show, so to speak, global art from China, and the other which really shows more traditional art or art which deals with tradition, Chinese traditions, but from a younger generation. So which is not just continuing something, but like coming back.
Or looking back, or kind of going from the own cultural heritage.
Renewing tradition, not to try to go back to something which was whole and complete, but
and just copying it, something else.
But trying to renew it, to find new ways of telling old stories, and by that, especially if it's with landscape painting, sometimes including ecological critique with it, or trying to understand the relation which now exists to nature, and all these fascinating questions. And then with the other part, with the more documentary part, as a complementing chapter, there's this chapter which with artworks who are more emotional, more subjective, giving an inner perspective on what is huge development in China.
So at one point, kind of the outer view, in a sense, on China, and then also like the inner view on China. You try to document. Going back to this phenomenon, global art, what did you experience there? Did you find global Chinese art, or isn't it a contradiction in itself if you say global Chinese? Because if it's global, then
actually, I was thinking, how would I explain that with Swiss contemporary art? And it's very much the same. Contemporary Swiss artists, they don't want to be Swiss. They don't want you to recognize that they are Swiss. They want to be contemporary. So actually, it's more about asking yourself, what makes this art contemporary? But of course, that chapter opens with a big space where I have some gorgeous painting by Liu Wei, where you don't realize that it's Chinese painting at all. You see it's a contemporary painting. It's a painting which reflects the influence of new media on the painting, on the way you look at nature or landscape. And my aim was that first you don't realize you're in a show of contemporary Chinese art, but you just realize you're in a show of contemporary art. And then on second view, you start to realize certain aspects that are really
Chinese
coming out of the Chinese experience.
Yeah.
Like as a we have the paintings by Liu Wei, but then also a video sculpture from him with stripes with lines, which are produced electronically. Then on one hand, that you can always tell people, look, you see now this mixture in the painting already of realist and then abstract elements like the stripes, the lines. And then you have the lines reproduced in another media electronically with these videos. But then, of course, and monitor with this kind of stripes is also reminding you that this is what it looks like if in China you get on a website that is closed down. So this is a distinctive Chinese experience. So that by the second look, you can understand that probably to a Chinese audience, these works talk another story.
Yes.
And this is a kind of way, by different spaces with different artists, I try to sensitize our public to these questions. And of course, in the end, also make yourself aware what Swiss contemporary art, the Swissness of contemporary art, Swiss contemporary art. And it's just by realizing that things which have a certain international air, feel, a certain style, that it's much more, it has more layers and more things to discover. But also to say, these days it's not anymore the question if contemporary Chinese art is as forward, is as good, is as advanced as Western contemporary art, but it's more finding their own voice. And yeah, I think that was one of the topics that that interests me the most by the discussions I could follow among our professionals, our critics in China.
This kind of topic you were just mentioning.
Yes, the relation to the West. Do we always have to copy? Is it just good art if it's like Western art? And that also, I didn't want to be another Western curator coming, choosing some pieces and telling the world this is good Chinese art. Because of course I had the advantage that Uli Sigg already chose the pieces for his collection. But from there, I wanted to be, I wanted to have a humble approach and also, to leave it open, but so that there is more this gesture to learn.
To give kind of a selection and everybody can choose and not just say like, okay, this is what you should think or what Chinese art should look like.
That's why I was also quite happy with when I found this English expression that I didn't know before of Chinese whispers, that it's actually a children's game, an international, a global children's game, which has in every country a different name, and which is about producing rumors and misconceptions and distorted echoes, because I thought it's a great metaphor for my work, probably for our relation to China, to Chinese art, maybe sometimes also for the notion of Chinese artists from Western art. So it just goes everywhere.
Yeah, it is a great metaphor, I have to say. Yeah,
it's a good excuse also.
I was fascinated because I didn't know either, and when I learned about it, it was like, this is perfect.
Also, there are actually discussions in the internet if it's racist expression,
because it says Chinese.
Yeah, everything which you don't understand must be Chinese. But then I discovered that, for example, the French, they say they call the same game téléphone arabe, and so there is a German expression which says when you don't understand something, it must be Spanish, or obvious, or as I learned too, the Italians say when they don't, something is not understandable, it must be Eastern Gothic, German. So you just see how it shifts from country.
So it's not just one country which gets picked out, but it's like everybody gets their turn.
So I was glad it was politically correct.
Definitely. We have one question from a participant. And she was watching your interview you did with Michael Sintel, and she's asking, in the interview with Michael Sintel, you mentioned that the Western dominance on looking at art will no longer exist, as China will have more and more influence in the art world. What do you think will be the first changes we will experience in the Western countries regarding this topic? Well, this kind of shift from our very Western-dominated perspective, this shifting in perspectives.
Yeah, maybe it's hard to answer that specific question. I can just maybe explain a bit more about my experience or what made me think of this, because I realized that, for example, most Western museums, I think, don't realize or don't confront this challenge of globalization yet. Which for me includes also to think about our criteria of quality, criteria of taste, or of actually our whole idea about what art should be, what it should look like, how it should transmit or communicate to us. It's like when you realize as a white person that white is also a color. As soon as you realize that, you will look at the whole notion of color differently, yes. Or gender. Yes. And you realize when a typical heterosexual man realizes also his gender is gender, not just women, yes. Or gay people or transgender people. Yeah. And it was more about that was my experience as well, that I realized, hey, I mean, normally when before this exhibition, I was looking at Chinese art, sometimes I didn't like the style. I thought it was this and that, or I thought it's like a bad copy of Western art. And just by learning more and by also trying to and accepting this challenge, which would mean that I would need to accept in the future also different tastes, open up my notion of art, which I think would also be very liberating for a lot of Western artists. Because then I also thought, probably when collectors like Uli Sigg collect Chinese art or non-Western art, a lot of times I think it's also because a lot of things went away from Western art, like a certain opulence, a certain Baroque style, an emotional quality. A lot of these things we got rid of in Western art. So I think there is a huge liberation. And I mean, it's probably hard to tell when this shift will actually occur, but I think as soon as we have more shows like this, which travel in the West, and it's not just under the label of this is Chinese art, but this is global art.
Or this is one kind, or you can see, but it's not a generalization.
We need to accept
it. Chinese art.
Yes. So not that it's the exotic art, but it's contemporary art. It's a contemporary expression of an experience that we need to look at seriously.
This exoticness, I mean, is a difficult point, I think, because, I mean, for them, our art is exotic as well, and we shouldn't forget about that. It always depends on your perspective, you're looking on things.
But I think it's hard for Chinese artists on one way to fight against this Western dominance, and on the other hand, not exoticize themselves, because that was also one of the explanations I found that Chinese art was very successful, because it was confirming a lot of exotic stereotypes that the Western collectors had. So it produced for these collectors and confirmed their expectance. And it's just that we need to get out of these traps, but to accept it as a contemporary, a contemporary expression in the first hand. And I think if you start also as a museum professional, that then you must think of the consequences. What would that mean for the collection? What would that mean for the kind of shows you do in the future? If you open up, it would also mean you think in a new way about what you already constructed as art history in your house. And I think this challenge hasn't arrived in the minds of people who run museums yet.
So you have to rethink actually your own collection.
Everything, which is also very interesting.
Yeah,
so we tell it in a different way, in front of another background, and focus. I think that's also a huge chance we get, because I think because our public is already quite global.
Yes,
we probably also can touch them more with these kind of perspectives than we do now. It's much more national, much more European, focused on European ideas. And so also for me, this was very challenging and very interesting and very rich experience, because exactly because of all these questions around the position of museums today.
Regarding museums, we have one more audience question from Roberto, and he's asking, do you know how Chinese visitors, do you have a lot of Chinese visitors, and if so, how do they react to this exhibition?
We do have, not that you could say it's like a third of our public is Chinese, but we do have occasionally Chinese visitors. I heard from some, that somebody heard from some Chinese artists living in Switzerland that they like the show because they felt that attitude that I tried to be respectful and humble and open up and not to be too dominant or bossy on this topic. We had, of course, some of the team of the M+ Museum of Hong Kong already visiting, and they were very, very happy with the show. They even thought with these 4 different chapters, and also by focusing on large works, which in a way already tell a lot by the way they are done, that it was a very good show on Chinese art, and I think that was the best compliment I could hope for. And actually, maybe the negative comments didn't reach me yet, but but actually I'm quite happy, because that is something that you can't learn, and you need to trust in a way your inner voice, your instinct, and
looking back at this experience during the exhibition, what topic or what aspect would you like to explore further regarding contemporary Chinese art?
It's so difficult to say, because I'm quite hooked with all these aspects, because I think they are continuing questions. I mean, I learned a lot, or I tried to look differently at this whole question of dealing with tradition. Because I also learned that actually, if today, as a global artist, you deal with tradition, it's not because you're backwards oriented or that you're sentimental or nostalgic, but it's different now, because all these images are around for all the time, and you can choose whatever you want.
They're accessible
for everyone. It may produce also a bit of dislocation. You're somewhere out there, of course, and you're a contemporary, but it's again a new urgency to think about cultural roots, which becomes more important,
especially nowadays with people uprooted and migrating and fleeing.
And I also must say that the examples of people dealing with tradition in Uli Sigg's collection are just wonderful, because they also always reflect on the fact that you can never get back to this, as we said before,
to this time or to this situation.
And also to this wholeness of tradition. And also, I mean, some British historians commented once that a lot of traditions are just pure inventions anyway, and that these inventions get more importance when a society or a culture is in a huge change. And I think this is exactly happening now to a lot of places in the world.
Yeah.
Tradition, even in Switzerland, if you look at Swiss politics, tradition suddenly becomes so important because we're now in the process of becoming a globalized society, which is of course producing all these anxieties. But
but you can't turn time back.
No, of course not.
You have to deal with it. Yeah,
of course. One of the main experiences I had was that to think about Chinese contemporary art brought me to think about myself.
Yes.
It was kind of mirroring who we are in the West, if there's ever such a global and such a common identity.
Yeah.
And it's just some input, some energy I want to use to further think about also our culture, so that we're not looking at another culture to have it as the other, but to look at the things we have in common to make me think at the other aspect in my culture. So actually it's more about this dynamic that I want to pursue it. It's also from the beginning I knew I could not become an expert. I'm not an expert on that, but I don't need to be an expert because all these questions are for everyone in a way the same, even though from different perspectives, positions. But in a way, the challenge is there for everyone, and the answers can only be very unique and very subjective in the end.
Thank you very much, Kathleen Bühler, for this very interesting and insightful talk. Thank you, everyone at home and online, for your questions and for watching us. Our final online meeting will be with Michael Schindheim again. It will take place on Sunday, the 29th of May at 1 o'clock Central European Summer Time. And it runs about half an hour or 45 minutes. I think this will be it. Thank you so much. The exhibition runs until the June 19th.
Yes, correct.
Go and see the show. It's really worth it. Thank you all so much. See you next time. Thank you and good night.